So,
So
how about Flutter and Firebase?
it's great.
Yeah.
It's like peanut. The mission, should you choose to accept, is to build an app with Flutter and Firebase within 24 hours. This message will self-destruct in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, I'm Khanh. Welcome to Season 3 of Learn to Fly. I'm here on this awesome new set with Firebaser, Nohe. Nohe, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Nohe came to me earlier this year and wanted to do a 24-hour app challenge, and of course, I had to say yes. You want to give folks a rundown on the challenge?
Sure do. The idea is that we had 24 hours to build something as a team with Firebase and Flutter, also known as my ideal setup.
Or as Craig would say, the ideal setup. And to be clear, we didn't work on this for 24 consecutive hours. I don't think either one of us is built for that. We broke up our dev time over the course of about a week. That said, we decided to build an app where you can upload, share, and favorite videos.
Cool. Sounds like the classic fun CRUD app that we've built learning web development.
However, the cool part comes in after the video is uploaded. Once uploaded, the app will automatically generate a summary of the video. Now that I think about it, maybe I should use this app to generate the Flutter YouTube video summaries. Anyway, let's take a look at the app. So at the top, you have the app bar with the login button. And on the home screen, you have a list of video cards, which you can tap through to the video detail screen. On the video detail screen, it has the video player, view count, summary, and creator name. On the favorite screen, you have a list of your favorite videos, the upload screen where you can upload videos, and the My Channel screen where you can see all of your uploaded videos. You can also tap through the video card and set and edit the video metadata. Now that we've gotten the demo down, let's talk about building. Nohe, you want to kick us off?
I am so thankful that you worked on this with me because for design things, I'm not really that great of a designer or app builder, but I love thinking about backends and how to connect them all together.
And for me, I'm so happy that you worked on the back-end Firebase things because I don't have any personal experience with Firebase outside of hosting. I also generally prefer working on the front-end side of things too, so I think we made a pretty good team.
We do make a good team. To start building the idea, we first came up with our data model. We first sat down in front of a Jamboard and sketched out what our data model would look like, what collections we thought we needed, and what the document fields would contain. Once we started building, I realized that we overplanned and I could combine a lot of the fields and collections that we came up with. Then, once I had the skeletal structure of an application state figured out, I reached out to Khanh to help me make it look way better.
Not that much better. On the Flutter side of things, I really enjoyed waiting to write the code until after we had our data models put together. There were 2 benefits to this. First, it prevented me from over-designing for features that we wouldn't end up implementing at the end. I've done this on projects before, and even though I get to learn a lot, it's not an efficient use of time in the short term, especially when we're under a time constraint. And second, I really enjoy toying with the question, how can I best represent this data? Text is always the default. You have a label, the value. That's pretty typical and makes sense, but as I've learned more about design, I've come to learn that there are other ways to design representations of data so that it's easier for end users to understand. For example, originally our video state data model had 3 values, but we ended up using only 2, processing and published. So instead of using a drop-down menu to edit the state value as I had originally intended, I could use a switch instead because it was now a Boolean value. The switch adds some visual interest to the screen and eliminates some text from an already text-heavy screen. Now, this was a super fun project to work on all around, but one of the things that I was just blown away by was the wizardry that you pulled on the back end with Firebase. Now, Nohe got the video summaries done so fast. We planned a roadmap, and then within an hour, he's pinging me with summaries from a test run. He essentially had the backbone for our app up and running at that point. So how did you do that, and can you walk us through it?
Absolutely. I started with uploading a video to cloud storage. Once it's been uploaded, an event is emitted. A cloud function listens for that event and then converts the video from a video to an audio format.
Okay, that's cool. So how did you end up generating a summary of the video from that audio file?
This is where I felt like I cheated a little bit. I had a Firebase extension listening to the bucket, and then it automatically transcribes new audio files.
Did you get the transcribed text back as a JSON file?
Yes, I get a JSON file when the transcription is done. So I wrote a little bit more glue code to parse the JSON and place the transcription into a Firestore document.
So then how do we get a summary from that?
This is where I cheated again by using the Palm API extension for summarizing text. The Palm API is a generative API, and this extension will automatically summarize content that is stored in a Firestore document field. In our case, it was the audio transcription. Once the Palm API summarizes the video, it outputs a summary into a Firestore document, and poof, we're done.
You really had me do the hard work, huh?
Now you see why I volunteered to do the Firebase stuff. Yeah, the extensions are really what got this project off the ground in less than 24 hours, unless you use some of the new cool AI features that Google Cloud has been offering.
You mentioned cheating a few times, and I think that's so funny and so accurate. What's so great about this is that there's been so many AI discussions recently, and these extensions are essentially a cheat code that lets us developers have access to AI tools without being AI experts ourselves. And not to mention, these AI tools let us build features that would, take hundreds of hours to build otherwise. So once Nohe had that pipeline up and running, he went home and played video games. Just kidding. He created a Flutter project and wrote all of the code that interacted with Firebase and abstracted it away as a part of our application state. The neat part of this is that he would do his thing on the Firebase side, and at the same time, I'd do my thing with the UI code, and we would meet in the middle at the application state, because that was the piece that brought Flutter and Firebase together.
It was seamless, wasn't it?
Yeah, and on my end with building the UI, since we only had 24 hours to work on this, I reached for the material widget set. I love coming up with my own component designs. We just did not have time for that on this project. So it was nice that I already had all the components I needed as a part of material. I also didn't spend any time on theming either. I gave color scheme from seed the Flutter navy blue color code. It gave me back, an automatically generated color scheme, and I was done.
Looks great though.
Thank you. I think it looks pretty great too. I mean, especially when you think about the fact that I didn't spend any time thinking about complementary colors, contrast, or anything like that.
I personally want to know how you avoid everything overflowing in the app. Whenever I build a Flutter app, it seems I get the caution tape warning that something has gone wrong with my layout, and then I just Stack Overflow until it starts working again.
That usually happens when I'm building a vertical screen. I go, this screen is vertical. I'll use a column. 20 minutes later, I've added so many children to the column and it's overflowing. At that point, since I usually have repeating widgets like the video cards on the home screen, I replace the column with a list view builder, which lazily loads the video cards and makes the list scrollable. No more overflow.
Speaking of, there are multiple components where you're interacting with Firestore. Whether that's components being built based off of data that's been pulled from Firestore or you're updating the data that's stored there, how was your experience with that?
Well, you made my life really easy. Again, you abstracted away all of those interactions with our app state class. The data streams were really neat, and I loved how if the data was updated in Firestore, it would be reflected in screens without me ever having to think about the data. The view counts function was really cool too. All I had to do to increment view count was add a function call to my video player code and would increment the view count automatically. This is actually a great transition to our next section. So you always talked about our security story throughout this project. Why can't I just call the view count function, 5 million times and artificially inflate my view count?
Yeah, well, what we did was we created a cloud callable function that enforces app check on requests that it receives. So when we enforce app check in the function, we first validate that it has a valid app check token, and then we validate that the token hasn't already been used. Checking whether the token was already consumed is known as replay protection, a recently launched beta feature available to callable cloud functions and custom backends. Normally, without replay protection, app check tokens have a lifetime of anywhere from 30 minutes to 7 days. So since this was a high value endpoint, we wanted to use replay protection to force our view count requests to trigger re-attestation by the underlying attestation provider. This can help limit the amount of unattested requests that can be made to our API endpoint.
So does this mean that I should only use replay protection on all of my endpoints?
Not necessarily. Replay protection offers the highest level of protection by forcing re-attestation upon each new request, but at the cost of higher latency and higher quota consumption of the underlying attestation providers. It's really important to consider that trade-off and whether it's right for you.
So is app check what stops me from inserting random data into the database too?
No, that's security rules. Like most Firebase projects, we waited until we felt like we had our application logic down before we implemented security rules in preparation for our MVP launch. When starting a new Firebase project, you get the option to start in test mode, which gives your database wide open rules that allow anyone to write to the database. After we knew what our application needs were, which was vastly different from when we started, I implemented tightly constrained security rules that A, validated that the data being input into our application matched what I expected, and B, that no extraneous fields could be input by validating the document fields that were being sent up. This, of course, was in addition to validating users could only read and write to their own user collection.
Okay. And finally, can you touch a little bit on authentication for our app? We just used Google Sign-In, but we had other options as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For authentication, we went with Google Sign-In. Though if we were to build this application again, I would probably lean more into using Firebase UI since we have so many more authentication options available that we can add without any of the added overhead. I know this feels like a jump cut, but really, I just finished talking. One thing that we suffered from the most while working on this project was scope creep. It seemed like every single time we'd sync up on progress, we'd also try to add 2 to 3 new features. We got in the habit of asking ourselves, do we need it? Do we have time? I have a terrible memory. Can you remind me of some of the features that we didn't implement?
Yeah, there was a lot of feature work that we left on the table. We wanted to be adding things like notes and a comment section. I was particularly excited about doing a picture-in-picture feature to try and have a video playing in the corner while the user navigates around the app. But, there was just not enough time. Not to mention, we did not have time to go back and review or change our code to make sure that it was the best quality. I did my best to organize components into individual files and keep things organized, but towards the end, I was just plugging in code and making things work. Of course, we also found a lot of bugs during our final manual testing phase. In the future, I'd also want to use more inheritance and make components more reusable. For example, the video card and user video card are currently independent of each other, so I tried to streamline those a bit more. That reminds me, we were talking about the app state code that interacts with Firestore and how it just updates an entire map with the video information every time there's a document change.
Yes, I use listeners because I really think they're neat. But for a real app, we probably wouldn't want to do this.
Right, yeah. So what would you have done differently for our app?
Well, every app will have different requirements, but for this project, since we just wanted to get a proof of concept off the ground, I queried everything in the database, and when anything would change in the collection, I updated a local copy of that collection. This is okay for a few videos, but if we were to release this publicly and have hundreds or thousands of changes to the public video listings, we would be having lots of UI updates and then large queries against the backend. What we really want to do is paginate through the data, so we are not making large queries to the backend and downloading the data that users may never see.
So just grab 10 documents at a time?
It's up to each app, but if I were to do it, maybe 50. We should probably do some user testing to figure out how much users scroll before finding a video they want. We could also use Firebase UI to implement the paging for us, which would have accelerated the development time.
Okay, phew, that was a lot. I think that brings us toward the end of this episode.
So, what's your main takeaway from this project?
Well, I think we learned a lot building this project for sure. We got up and running with a pretty solid app for only, 24 hours of development. I'll admit I have to poke around Firebase more after this project, so you'll probably be hearing from me sooner rather than later. How about you?
This was a blast to do. I think I really want to try not having overflowing widgets, as that seems to be a large problem of mine. We'd love to meet you and see what you've built with Flutter and Firebase. Our Firebase and Flutter teams will be at DevFest meetups with Google developer groups around the world. So come on down and show us your projects. Check out the link in the video description to find the DevFest closest to you.
And if you can't make it out to a DevFest, tweet your projects at us on Twitter at FlutterDev, at Firebase with the hashtag FlutterWithFirebase. Nohe, thank you so much for joining me. I had an absolute blast working with you.
Thanks for having me. It was honestly a pleasure.
And thank you for watching this episode of Learn to Fly with Firebase Edition. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.